We're going to take a look at dial calipers. This is a measuring tool that we're going to use to measure down to 1/1000th of an inch. So before we start to use it, we need to make sure that it's set up properly. So let's learn about some of the different parts of it. So first thing, you might notice that the dial on here is not actually set to 0. Even though this mouth is closed, the jaw is closed all the way, it's not sitting at 0. So first thing I'm going to do is loosen this knob just a little bit, enough that I can easily turn this dial so that it's perfectly aligned over the 0. So as long as the jaw is closed, this is at 0, I can gently, don't have to put a lot of force there, snug that set screw back up. Now it's calibrated, ready to use. On the back here we have a knob that's going to help us lock this in place. So if I was to get a measurement and I didn't want it to move, because this is pretty sensitive, I can go ahead and I can gently set this knob down, set the set screw in place gently, and then it's not going to be able to move while we move the calipers around. So for now, I'm just going to loosen it up a little bit so that I can open and close the caliper. So how I usually do is I put my thumb on this wheel and I push up, and then I'm going to rotate back or rotate forward in order to open or close the jaw. Notice that on this jaw, the front of it's kind of chiseled towards a little bit towards the center here. It has flat sections. So you can see that. So these are the areas that we'll measure in. And be careful, because back here we end up having an opening that is not where we want to measure. So how do we read a dial caliper? It's a little bit different than our rulers, which we were using a 16th scale. Now we're going to find out that our inch is broken down into tenths. So every little section here is representing 1/10 of an inch. So the 1 is 1/10, 2, 2/10, 3, 3/10, so on and so forth. Notice that when we get to 10, it goes to our actual whole inch here, and you can see that 1's a little bit higher than the other numbers. So as I keep going, and I get past the next inch, you can see it switches to 2, and then 3, and so on and so forth. So first thing we need to see is, are we more than 1 inch? So if we're going to use this measurement here, we can see that we are more than 1 inch. And then the next step is to look at our tenths. So in this case, we're at 1 point. See, the section is our 10th section. Are we actually all the way past that, or are we still within that 10th? And I can tell right here on the dial that I'm not quite past it. So I'm actually at 1.096. If I was all the way past it, I would need to be, this dial would have to go past the 0. Now I'm past it. So now I'm at 1.101. So it's important to make sure that if you include this section, you have to be completely past the section in order to include it. So let's grab a measurement of our bolt. So I'm going to see how big the head of the bolt is. I can go ahead and I'm going to rest it between the flats here. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and take a look what this measurement is. So I'm not past a whole inch, so I have to say point. My 10th here, I'm at 0.5 because I'm not past the entire 6 section. So you can see here that the 6, I'm still inside of that. So I'm at 0.5, and then I'm going to read the dial over here, and this says 5.9. So 0.559 is the measurement for the bolt head. Let's say I was measuring between the diameter of between the threads here. I can go ahead and use the sharp part of the tool. We're going to read it. So we're not past a whole inch, so I need to say point. And I am past the 3, so I'm going to say 0.3. And I'm going to read the dial 1, 0. So you may have noticed that there's other parts to this dial caliper. We've been using this part here to measure with, but we can also use this part in the back. What we're going to use that for is to figure out the inside or internal diameter of something. So let's say I have this pen cap here and I want to see how big the opening is. I could slide this end in and then gently expand it to get it to rest against the inside of that, And I like to spin it around a little bit if it's a circle to make sure I'm actually at the widest diameter. Alright, let's see what we got. So I'm at 0.3, and I would have to read the dial here because I'm not past the 4 yet, so I'm at 0.3, and that looks like 82. We can get down to looking at other measurements. Maybe I want to know the distance in between here, so I could use that to measure my slot distance. Slide that open. Let's say that's what we got. So take a minute now, give that a shot. What is this measurement? So if you got 1.302, you would be correct. There's another method on this dial caliper that we can use to measure things with. So we've already used the jaw here, we've used our back jaw to measure internal stuff. What about this part that's sticking out down here in the bottom? So that's going to be something we use to figure out the depth of something. So let's say I take the same pen cap and I want to know what the depth of that cap is. So I'm going to slide this down in and I'm going to open this up until I hit the bottom of that opening, and then I can bring that back, and I'm just resting that against the bottom of the tool. So this piece will slide all the way out, and then I'm looking at just as it hits the bottom here, that's going to measure the depth. Okay, and then what I can do is go ahead and read the measurement just like we did before. So this pen cap has a depth of, take a minute here and try it out. If you got 1.627 or 1.628, you would be correct.